This is Stories from the States. I'm Chris Fitzsimon. Here at States Newsroom, we know there's a lot going on around the country every week in every state. This week, we're talking about wolves. The animal has been at the center of debate. Do we reintroduce them or should we hunt them? But if we were talking about them almost 70 years ago, the animal had been virtually exterminated from the western United States. Since their 1995 reintroduction in Idaho and Yellowstone National Park, the animals have thrived. Now there's over 3,000 of them living from Idaho to the Mexican border. This week, we're handing the reins over to our friends at the Idaho Capital Sun and Boise State Public Radio to dive into one of America's wildest comeback stories, wolf reintroduction. They put together Howl, a series diving into the story about wolves and the people affected most by them. We'll let reporters Clark Corbin and Heath Drusen take it away.
When I go to Yellowstone, I like to get up early and get into the park before sunrise. One thing I love about it is getting serenaded. That's known as the dawn chorus. It's the symphony of birdsong heard at daybreak from spring to midsummer. Yellowstone is a place I know well. I've crisscrossed the national park through Idaho, Wyoming, and Montana on foot, bike, and skis. I've had close encounters with bear, moose, and bighorn sheep. But one wildlife run-in sticks out in my mind. I was hiking in a part of the park called the Lamar Valley. No geysers, no waterfalls, no lodges. The Lamar isn't a land of obvious attractions. The attraction is the wildlife. And it's a place where we'll spend a lot of time this podcast. About a mile in, I saw movement in the sagebrush ahead of me. I froze and stared hard up the hill. About 200 feet in front of me, a large black wolf trotted out into the open. Behind her were 3 young pups. I was alone. The only sound was leaves rustling in the breeze. The mama wolf stopped. She sat on her haunches and looked at me, tongue out. I expected her to be on guard, but she looked relaxed, and I struggled to look the same. We looked at each other for what felt like forever. Finally, the wolf got up and casually loped off with her pups bouncing behind her. They disappeared over a hill and out of sight. My heart was racing. Just after they went out of sight, they linked up with their pack. Then I sat there utterly alone, immersed in the eerie, melancholy tones. The encounter, which I thankfully remembered to record, illustrated what wolves bring to the landscape, a sense of untamed nature, where you can truly be a visitor in the domain of the wild. But a familiarity, too. A social animal with family bonds that looks similar to a lot of people's pets. They're part of the reason even New Yorkers who will never visit Yellowstone have a romantic vision of the West. What happened next underscored how fragile our coexistence with wolves is. A little farther down the trail, I ran into an odd sight in Yellowstone. A man and a woman with paintball guns. Their wildlife conservation group had been contracted by Yellowstone. The mama wolf and her packmates were straying over the invisible Yellowstone boundary nearby. That meant they went from legally protected to basically open season. Many had been killed in recent years by ranchers outside the park. They worry the wolves are a threat to their livestock. The paintballers were there to harass the wolves away from the ranchers back to the safety of the park. For wolves here and in much of America, death always lurks nearby. This experience set me on a journey to learn more about these top predators. Why did they inspire so much adoration, fear, and resentment in equal measure? How had they become nearly extinct in the West? And what did their return mean for the environment and the people who lived side by side with them? It led me to make this podcast, which led me back to the Lamar Valley. It's where the last wild bison were saved from extinction in the early 1900s. These days, massive herds crisscross it. But what it's really famous for is that it's probably the best place to spot a wolf in America. But that wasn't possible just 3 decades ago. This iconic animal had been hunted to extinction in pretty much the entire West. But then, in 1995, the federal government reintroduced wolves in Yellowstone and central Idaho. Since then, they've spread far and wide. In fact, farther and wider than anyone ever anticipated. This year is the 30th anniversary of wolves' return to the West. For this podcast, we're hiking deep into the Yellowstone and Idaho backcountry. So we're looking for the trail again. It's been disappearing on us at this juncture here. On the trail of the elusive predator.
This looks potentially like could be wolf shit.
Oh, wow.
There's a wolf track right here.
To meet the people who put the wolves back in the West.
Wolves definitely have changed this landscape.
And talk with the ranchers and hunters who want most of them gone.
I think that misuse of the Endangered Species Act is economic and domestic terrorism.
And we'll sit down with indigenous Americans whose relationship with the wolf goes back millennia before America existed.
The Creator told us that it's our job to honor them, take care of them, and to always nurture them. And we're failing. And that was the sadness that I've heard in the voices of my elders.
I'm Heath Drusen, and this is Howl, the story of nature's greatest comeback, what it's meant for the West, and how it could all be undone. Episode 1. Kill all the goddamn wolves and the people who brought them. Before we get deeper into the season, I want to introduce myself and my reporting partner. I'm an Idaho-based journalist and podcaster. I report a lot on extremism and the environment. As you'll hear this season, wolves are an environmental issue that brings out some extreme feelings. So kind of my journalistic sweet spot here. I'm reporting this podcast with Clark Corbin, who you'll hear from time to time in this series.
Hey there, Clark here. Yeah, I'm a politics reporter with the Idaho Capital Sun, and I also live in Idaho.
I partnered with Clark on this because he's one of the few reporters I know game enough to follow me into the places where people are visitors and wolves are at home. Places that are hard to get to and often require sturdy shoes, a backpack, and a tent.
You could say that we're adventure buddies, or as some of our friends would attest, misadventure buddies.
All right, that's enough about us. You came to hear about wolves. On New Year's Day, 1995, there were virtually no wild wolves in the western U.S.
The wolf. For centuries, it has been feared like no other animal. An able, efficient predator, it has been branded a killer, a threat even to man.
Wolves were also in conflict with the changing western U.S. in the 19th century.
The modern world was steaming in. Settlers were arriving by the trainload. Livestock were pouring in. Ranching was big business.
And livestock and wolves don't always mix. So along with cows and sheep, the settlers also brought anti-wolf attitudes that went back to the old country. The big bad wolf must go. Shooting and trapping took their toll, but poison was the biggest killer. This happened equally on ranch land and in national parks. Cowboys and Yellowstone Rangers alike went about ridding their areas of wolves. There's a photo from 1926 from the Lamar Valley. that wild corner of Yellowstone where we spent a lot of time for this podcast. It's two wolves caught in a trap near a small extinct geyser called Soda Butte. These were the last wolves killed in the park. The howls went silent after that. By the 1940s, wolves had been pretty much eradicated from the entire western U.S. Most scientists now think that extermination campaign represents the bad old days. The days before we understood the value of nature, before we understood the importance of predators in keeping the ecosystem in balance. For a lot of ranchers in wolf country, though, those were the good old days. Wolves were gone, and good riddance. Their forefathers did what they had to in order to tame the land. And their victory should be preserved. And it was preserved for decades. But in the early 1990s, the ranchers were overruled.
The howl of the wolf has been absent in this, the world's first national park, for nearly 70 years. On January 12, 1995, it was heard again as a horse trailer carrying Canadian wolves passed through the gate into Yellowstone's northwest entrance.
President Bill Clinton gave the green light to a plan to bring wolves back to the American West. It was the culmination of a more than 20-year effort. It began in 1973, when wolves were listed as an endangered species. Clinton and his Interior Secretary Bruce Babbitt okayed the return because the absence of wolves had left the environment out of whack. Populations of the animals wolves ate, like elk and deer, had ballooned, and they were overgrazing the land. But to bring back wolves to Yellowstone and Idaho, the U.S. government had to find them somewhere. Remember, for all intents and purposes, there weren't any left in the Rocky Mountains. And so the modern American wolf story actually starts in Canada. The government of Canada agreed to let the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service capture a few dozen animals to bring back to America. That's the sound of a helicopter from a home movie of the effort to capture wolves for reintroduction to the U.S. There are guys in puffy red Sub-Zero flight suits and fur caps, chunky boots and flannel galore. In one shot, the camera looks out of a chopper and a black wolf bounds through the snow, flushed by the rotor noise. It's all happening in northern British Columbia and Alberta in the dead of winter. The landscape is frozen. Rolling white terrain interspersed with pine forest as far as the eye can see. And it is cold.
Yeah, I mean, the first night in town was 52 below zero, and all our trucks froze up right where we parked them, and nobody, I mean, you couldn't even get a click out of the starter in the morning.
That's Carter Niemeyer. We're going to spend some time with him because he was key to wolf reintroduction. And he is legendary here in the Mountain West. Back in 1994, he was working for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, leading the project to capture the Canadian wolves.
I thought I died and went to heaven, getting to be selected to be on this crew of very limited people, and then getting to be on the capture crew especially, just be out in the helicopters and get to do the wolf handling.
He's 6'6" with a powerful build, even in his 70s, and favors flannel and jeans. He's got a mustache, a twinkle in his eye, and a big silver belt buckle he won at a shotgun competition in 1990. Best-selling author Nicholas Evans even based one of his characters on Carter. Carter is a trapper and tracker. Growing up in Iowa, he started trapping pocket gophers as a young boy. Farmers paid him 50 cents a corpse to keep their fields free of gopher holes.
So yeah, that's my first love is trapping, always has been.
And he kept trapping when he got older, becoming an expert at catching just about every wild animal that roams North America. He even developed his own foul-smelling, extremely effective bait mixes. Proprietary blends that can include ground-up beaver and a bobcat's anal gland. Carter spent decades as U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's go-to guy when problem animals needed to be trapped. His job also left him with some of the wildest stories I've ever heard.
The best one to tell, I guess, is about my porcupine, pucker pea pine, that I delivered cesarean from its dying mother.
Honestly, his tales are so out there, I'd normally think he was full of it. Except nearly everyone we spoke to for this podcast knows Carter and vouches for his hijinks. But his primary job was killing. And after a while, the number of dead animals caught up to even Carter.
And I became really good at what I did. And I almost felt that it was unfair. And I think there was always, when you were trapping, killing fox and coyotes, got to show people I'm good, but I got to possess it. And you end up killing it and pelting it and hang them all up for a picture. And it's your ego. You're feeding your ego and really wanting people to know, hey, look at me.
He says his mindset started to change when his job became trapping endangered grizzly bears and wolves to move or radio collar them. Now, his job was to keep his trapped animals alive. Today, he's one of the fiercest advocates for predators, especially wolves.
You couldn't pay me $100,000 to kill a wolf. I just enjoy watching them.
This change in attitude was underway when he arrived in Canada 30 years ago, as part of the team to capture wolves destined for reintroduction in the Northern Rockies. Here's what the plan was. The U.S. had an agreement with our neighbors to the north to capture several dozen wolves. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service had contracted with Canadian trappers to catch the animals alive. There was one big problem when Carter arrived. The Canadians hired to help catch the wolves to repopulate the Rockies were killing the animals instead.
The guys were killing them, skinning them, and putting them on stretching boards. And then I got up there and met them, and we had a confrontation. They told me to take my truck and get the hell out of town.
That doesn't sound like a good start. It turns out the Canadians thought they were getting stiffed on their contracts because no one from the U.S. government had come out to collect the wolves. Carter had some trust building to do. So he leaned on his strengths.
I said, I ain't leaving. I'm up here to do this job. And the next thing you know, we're in a wolf skinning contest in a trapper's living room.
This was a competition to see who could skin a wolf the fastest. There might have been some drinking involved. Anyway, Carter won the skinning contest. And by doing so, he won over the Canadians. After that, Carter and his team prepared to fit several so-called Judas wolves with radio transmitters. They were so named because these wolves would unknowingly betray their packs by leading the reintroduction team to them. And that would give the team the opportunity to capture enough animals to start repopulating the western U.S. With that, the helicopter rotor blades started up and the team prepared for their mission. But after all of that drama, Carter almost had to abandon his project before it began.
I froze my toe one of the first days out.
It was black from severe frostbite. Remember, it was getting down to 50 below zero. The team doctor took one look at Carter's toe and ordered him off the project. Said he could lose the toe if he continued. And so, Carter did the only thing he thought reasonable. He ignored medical advice, got new boots, and continued on.
Why'd you keep going?
Because I was up there. I mean, that was what I went up to do, and I did not intend to quit or leave the project till it was done.
He carried on with his blackened toe tucked safely into a new pair of big, puffy moon boots. Carter actually darted the very first wolf that was captured for release. He named it Carter's Hope. But shooting wolves with tranquilizer darts wasn't his main job.
I was mostly mugging. The mugger is the guy who you dump out in snow 20 feet deep and you roll and crawl and drag yourself through this ungodly deep snow. Sometimes we're just the little tops of the pine trees were sticking out because the wolves get darted in there and you can't land.
He was literally dragging the tranquilized wolves through the snow with no snowshoes or even sled to pull them. He and his teammates would bring the wolves back to the warehouse by the helipad, check their vitals and general health, then put them in a pen. Then they'd do it all over again. In all, they'd capture 66 wolves between late 1994 and early 1996. Then the wolves were brought to the release areas in Wyoming and Idaho. When a plane carrying the wolves landed at a nearby airport in Montana, members of the Nez Perce tribe welcomed the wolves back with a special prayer ceremony. It was led by the late Horace Axtell, a Nez Perce spiritual leader.
I'm going to pray for these 4 brothers or sisters, whatever they are, and welcome them back to the land that they own along with the rest of us. Thank you.
It's hard to hear, but he's saying they're welcoming the wolves back to the land as brothers and sisters. The tribe will go on to play a crucial, little-known role in wolf recovery that we'll learn more about in the next episode. But the Nez Perce greeting, that was not the greeting the wolves would have at their next stop, Idaho. And reintroduction team members would have to weigh risking their lives for the project. More after the break. In central Idaho, the next step was to actually release the wolves. The plan was to put them in national forest land, just outside several ranching communities. And locals were not happy about it. Community meetings with federal wildlife officials and residents often devolved into screaming matches.
Those meetings were tense, and they were not fun. We can get in those mixed groups now and have more logical, more level-headed conversations than we could back then. But it was very tense. It was very stressful at that point in time.
That's Jay Smith, a fourth-generation rancher who was at those meetings. He says part of the tension was due to government dishonesty.
We had officials at public meetings tell us that wolves would not eat cattle, that elk was their food source, and so that they were not going to eat our cattle. This government official told us that over and over and over again. And I looked him in the eye and I said, are you telling me that when they're hungry, they're going to pick a smart, fast elk over a slow, dumb cow? You know, we just got fed a bunch of bull. And that was frustrating.
It wasn't just ranchers who opposed reintroduction. And it wasn't a political party divide in the Mountain West. Idaho's Governor Cecil Andrus, a Democrat, came out against the plan. Montana's governor did too. Andrus's Republican successor, Phil Batt, even threatened to call in the National Guard to stop reintroduction. Idaho State Representative Joanne Wood went on TV saying the federal government was breaking the law.
We think they've done it illegally. And we think that they've gone outside of their jurisdiction to go ahead and put those wolves in here without an agreement of the state to do it.
Not everyone was so measured.
No compromise, no consensus, and no Canadian gray wolves in Idaho.
There was a hardcore wing of the anti-wolf movement. And Suzanne Aisha Stone found out how deadly serious those feelings could run. Suzanne is an internationally known wolf advocate and expert now. Back in 1994, though, she was an intern with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Suzanne was out with researchers in central Idaho shortly before wolves were scheduled to be reintroduced. Her team was surveying the land they would inhabit, a place where the occasional lone wolf still haunted the woods. The team flew on a small plane to an airstrip in the Frank Church River of No Return Wilderness. It's the largest contiguous wilderness in the continental U.S.
When we landed, we got news that someone had seen a wolf or wolves over in a place called Bear Valley, adjacent to the Frank Church River of No Return Wilderness area. So we, on our way back, diverted and drove out there. Dr. Fritz was teaching me how to howl for wolves. That's how we used to look for wolves. We were on a Forest Service road out in the backcountry on the National Forest. And I got to my second howl, and we had rifle bullet just zing right over the top of our heads.
Suzanne said she's not sure if the shooters knew there were people around, but to shoot blindly towards a road showed deadly recklessness at best, something more sinister at worst. It wasn't the last time Suzanne and others on the wolf reintroduction team would have their lives threatened, but it didn't stop them. In January 1995, Suzanne's team had the job of meeting the Canadian wolves as they arrived in Idaho. These were the wolves Carter and his crew had captured. Suzanne was waiting for them in the small town of Salmon in central Idaho. Salmon and the surrounding area is ranching country. Suzanne told me members of the reintroduction team got a chilling warning when they arrived in town.
There were even signs in Salmon when we were there of kill all the wolves and all the people who brought them here or bringing them here. There were threats of vigilantes coming together. So we ended up having to have a lot of protection, not only for the wolves, but for ourselves, because our safety was at risk.
After those threats, armed federal agents were assigned to guard Suzanne and her team. And the safest spot they could find for the wolves was the local airport.
It was a hangar that had a tall barbed wire fence around the outside, and we took the wolves into the hangar, and they stayed there overnight.
But there was more. Before the convoy left, Suzanne's team got a pretty alarming intel report.
We were definitely notified that there was going to likely be an ambush on the road going out to where we had to drive them out to, because we couldn't fly them out as we had planned to, because the weather was so bad that they, grounded all the aircraft. So, it was crazy. But then the next morning, the sun came out a bit. We had a convoy of vehicles that drove into the backcountry with these 4 wolves, and we didn't, face down any type of ambush. It was just, the road was really slick, and the road was pretty scary.
So, just to recap, on the day Suzanne's team was set to release wolves into Idaho, there was a report of a potential violent attack. There was a major snowstorm that shut down air traffic, and the roads were so bad that seatbelts seemed like a hazard due to the real chance of vehicles sliding into an icy river. But Suzanne and everyone else still went ahead with the plan that day. In an old video of the release day, federal wildlife officials load sedated wolves into metal crates. Then a convoy of light green U.S. Forest Service pickups takes off. Suzanne climbed in the lead truck with an armed federal marshal. The trucks crawled down roads that were covered in a sheet of ice, and team members scanned the sides for possible attackers. But they plowed ahead, quite literally. Conditions were such that a snowplow led the way. In the video, they get to a lightly wooded spot on the road, stop, line up the crates, and the wolves bounded into maybe the most awesomely named stretch of national forest, the Frank Church River of No Return Wilderness. Right around the same time, they were also released into pens in the Lamar Valley, the remote corner of Yellowstone National Park where my own wolf journey began. Federal officials hoped the wolves might find enough elk and deer to survive and avoid deadly conflicts with ranchers and poachers. With a little luck, they thought wolves might eke out a population of a few hundred, eventually. Just about everyone underestimated the animals and their potential impact. Just about everyone except the people whose ancestors had spent millennia with wolves.
Well, the wolf, he teaches us certain things. He has a little family group that the wolf sustains. Sometimes they kick out outsiders or someone trying to come in and join their group. So there's a leadership organization within the wolf pack, a dominant female, a dominant male.
But plenty of people also underestimated the Nez Perce tribe when they stepped in to play a crucial, little-known role in wolf recovery.
I'd hear all the chatter about, well, can the tribe do this? How can they do that? They, had all these questions, and sometimes it was racist. It wasn't just the fact that they were asking an honest question, but it had to be like, okay, these Indians, this or that. Okay.
That's next time on Howl. Howl was created by me, Heath Drusen. It was written and reported by me and Clark Corbin. Johanna Zorn edited Howl. Mixing and sound engineering by James Dawson. Make sure to check out the companion written series at idahocapitalsun.com. That's capital with an A. It's different than the podcast and well worth checking out. Music from Artlist. Additional reporting from Mary Ellen Pitney. Thanks to Sasha Woodruff, Christina Lords, Tom Michael, Julie Lucchetta, Kyle Fahnensteel, Katie Kloppenberg, and Lacey Daly. Special thanks to Morgan Springer. This episode included sound from the series Nature and Wild Kingdom. Howl is part of the Boise State Public Radio podcast family. It's hosted in partnership with the Idaho Capital Sun, part of the States Newsroom network. Howl was edited with assistance from the editor corps of the Public Media Journalists Association, with support from the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, a private corporation funded by the American people. It was also supported by a grant from the Fund for Investigative Journalism.